We're coming close to the end. Dynasty 31, the Achaemenid Persians. But wait, you might notice that Egypt's 27th and 31st dynasties were both ruled by Persian kings from the same Achaemenid family. So, why are they listed as two separate dynasties? It's because the Persians actually ruled Egypt twice. The first time began when Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus the Great, conquered Egypt in 525 BC. That's the 27th dynasty. Later, the Egyptians regained their independence for about 60 years under native pharaohs. Then, in 343 BC, the Persians came back under Artaxerxes III and took Egypt again. Since this was the second period of foreign rule, Egyptian historians counted it as a new dynasty, the 31st. So, even though it was the same Persian royal line, they ruled Egypt in two separate periods of history, which is why the dynasties are numbered separately. After Artaxerxes III's departure from Egypt for Babylon in 343 or 342 BC, Greek sources fall completely silent about Egypt and its relations with Persia until Alexander the Great's campaign a decade later. For the period between Artaxerxes' victory and Alexander's arrival in 332 BC, we have to rely pretty much entirely on a handful of Egyptian sources. The evidence is indeed sparse. It includes a demonic loan contract dated to the 18th year, 2nd month of Nectanebo II, and an inscription of Ptolemy X that retrospectively mentions a royal gift of land to the Temple of Horus at Edfu during the same year, that is, 342 BC, after Artaxerxes III had already left Egypt. Additional dating formulas appear in a marriage contract of a Theban priest and on an Apis bull sarcophagus from Memphis, both citing the regnal years, first year, 3rd month, and second year, 3rd month, of some king named Khababash, who is never mentioned by Manetho. The notary of that marriage contract appears again in a document from the 320s BC, suggesting that Khababash reigned not long before that time. The name Khababash also turns up on a scarab, a vase, leather sling bulla, and an amulet, all from Lower Egypt. Since the line of native rulers from Amyntas of the 28th dynasty to Nectanebo II of the 30th is well known and uninterrupted, the only possible place for a 4th century BC Khababash is after Nectanebo II, but before Alexander the Great and Ptolemy. This implies that there was a brief break in Persian control sometime after 343 or 342 BC. Further confirmation, and the object perhaps giving the most clues regarding Khababash's kingship, comes from what's known as the Satrap stela. The inscription on this monument dates to 311 BC, when Ptolemy I, still officially a satrap under the authority of Alexander IV, was at war with Antigonus the One-Eyed and Demetrius, and expecting to be invaded after his campaign into Syria in 312 BC. The stela records Ptolemy's renewal of a land grant, the Sea Land in the Delta, to the Temple of Horus at Buto, said to have been originally made by Khababash. According to the inscription, Ptolemy, having returned from a victorious campaign, was seeking divine favor from the Egyptian gods, and was told by an influential Egyptian the following story about a recent royal act by a little-known king. The northern marshland, whose name is the land of Edjo, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, the son of Ra, Khababash, living forever, gave it to the gods of Pe and Dep after his majesty proceeded to Pe and Dep, making a circuit of the marshland that is its entire territory, going into the interior of the swamps and examining each Nile branch that goes to the sea, in order to repel the ships of Asia from Egypt. Then His Majesty said, "Let the priests and high dignitaries of Pe and Dep be brought," so that they were brought to him in haste. Then His Majesty said, "Inform me of the wrath of the gods of Pe and Dep, how they dealt with the enemy because of the evil deed that he had done. Behold, they say that the enemy Xerxes did an evil deed against Pe and Dep, having seized its property, so that they said before His Majesty, 'Sovereign, our lord, Horus the son of Isis, the son of Osiris, after whom there is no king, expelled the enemy Xerxes from his Egyptian palace, together with his eldest son. By the order of Ptolemy, the satrap, the land of Edgjo, I shall give it to Horus, the protector of his father, lord of Pe, and to Edgjo, lady of Pe and Dep, from today forever, together with all its towns, and everything that derives from it, and which has been part of it previously, together with whatever is added to it, together with the donation made by the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, lord of the two lands, Khababash, living forever." So, in case you're wondering who or what Pe and Dep are, this is a reference to the twin cities that together formed ancient Buto, which was a major religious center in the Nile Delta of Lower Egypt. Pe, or Per Wedjet, was the northern or western part of the area and a cult center of the god Horus. Dep, also written Depet, was the southern or eastern part and the cult center of the cobra goddess Wadjet, the protective deity of Lower Egypt. Over time, the two towns merged into a single city, known to the Greeks as Buto. So, when the text says, "the gods of Pe and Dep," it's referring to Horus of Pe and Wedjet of Dep, the divine protectors of Buto and pretty much the Delta region. But, back to the meaning of the satrap stela. It's basically telling us that Ptolemy officially confirmed a grant originally made by King Khababash. The text then lists the precise boundaries of the estate and concludes with another acknowledgement of Khababash as the original donor. This section reads, "All of this the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, lord of the two lands, the son of Ra, Khababash, living forever, donated to the gods of Pe and Dep forever. And this great ruler of Egypt, Ptolemy, has renewed the donations to the gods of Pe and Dep forever." There's much here that remains uncertain, and the Persian king is actually Artaxerxes III, not Xerxes, though the latter had also previously been disliked in Egypt. Regardless, the inscription clearly attests to the kingship of a ruler named Khababash. This, combined with the dates given in the Theban marriage contract, places his reign between Nectanebo II's defeat in 343 BC and Alexander the Great's arrival in Egypt. The year before Alexander advanced into Egypt, the Persian satrap Sabakes, and not Pherendatis, who had been installed by Artaxerxes in 343 or 342 BC, was in command. According to the historian Arrian, Sabakes later joined Darius III with Egyptian troops and died at the Battle of Isis in 333 BC. His successor, or subordinate, Mazakes, was in charge when Alexander arrived in 332 BC. This suggests that Khababash briefly re-established native Egyptian rule after Artaxerxes III's conquest in 343 BC, but that the Persians soon regained control by 333 BC. Sparse though it is, This evidence allows for a tentative reconstruction of events. If the date formula from Edfu, Nectanebo II's 18th year, shows that he was still recognized in southern Egypt after 343 BC, then Artaxerxes III's victory may not have been as complete as previously believed. According to the historian Diodorus Siculus, after the fall of Bubastis, the remaining cities of the country surrendered, and, following Nectanebo II's flight from Egypt to Nubia, Artaxerxes took possession of all of Egypt and demolished the walls of its principal cities. Yet Diodorus never mentions Persian activity south of Memphis. Artaxerxes' possession of all Egypt may have been a political fiction, an assumption based on Nectanebo II's withdrawal rather than actual military control. Persian occupation may have thus been confined mainly to Lower Egypt, where revolts had traditionally begun and where most fortifications stood. With the delta subdued and its cities dismantled, Artaxerxes III could claim victory. To prevent future uprisings, he reportedly carried off Nectanebo's son and other delta nobles who might have rallied in opposition. Artaxerxes III then left Egypt quickly, likely due to unrest elsewhere within the Persian Empire. So then, where does Khababash fit into all of this? Artifacts and a few, and I mean very few, inscriptions attest to him at Thebes, Memphis, and Buto in the Nile Delta. This means that he must have had at least some control over both Upper and Lower Egypt for at least 2 years. If the satrap stela is accurate in describing him personally inspecting the northern Nile Delta to defend against the fleet of Asia, as the stela says, that is, the Achaemenid fleet, then Khababash clearly expected a renewed Persian invasion. A glimpse of this turbulent time may appear in the autobiographical inscription of Petosiris, the high priest of Thoth at Hermopolis, which was written around the same time. It reads, 7 years as controller for this god, administering his endowment without fault being found, while the ruler of foreign lands was protector in Egypt. And nothing was in its former place, since fighting had started inside Egypt, the south being in turmoil, the north in revolt. The people walked with head turned back. All temples were without their servants. The priests fled, not knowing what was happening. This likely refers to the chaos between the Persian withdrawal and reoccupation. In the satrap stela, the god Horus is said to have punished the miscreant by causing his death, and that of his son, in allusion to the future murder of, spoiler alert, Artaxerxes III and his heir in 338 BC. The priests add that this happened when there was no king, implying a power vacuum before Khababash's rise. If so, Khababash likely seized power soon after Artaxerxes' death in 338 BC. At that time, Artaxerxes III's young son, Arsis, succeeded him as Artaxerxes IV. His reign, however, was short-lived. According to Greek historians, he too was murdered by a royal courtier named Bagoas, who had somehow risen to become the empire's new kingmaker. That, of course, is a story of its own. With no remaining sons or brothers of Arsis to claim the throne, Bagoas elevated one of the young king's relatives, a cousin, to become king. This man would become Darius III. But Darius soon uncovered Bagoas' treachery and forced him to drink his own poison. At least, that's how Diodorus Siculus tells it in Library of History, Book 17, Chapter 5. The tale of court intrigue and regicide resembles many Persian succession crises, where blame was placed on ambitious courtiers to conceal rivalries within the royal family. The near extermination of Artaxerxes III's line left the empire destabilized, giving Egyptian rebels their opportunity, something that Khababash must have exploited. But who was this Khababash? His identity remains a mystery. Scholars have speculated that he may have been Nubian, Libyan, or even an Arab. The name itself is non-Egyptian. Its Shah ending could hint that he was of Libyan descent, as many ancient Libyan names ended with this sound. The Satrap stela shows that the priests of Buto regarded him as a legitimate Egyptian king, for he had restored temple lands and honored the gods in the proper way. Thus, an Egyptian of Libyan descent is plausible, especially in the western delta. Khababash must have also commanded a sizable military force. How Khababash overcame Persian garrisons is unknown. If Khababash began his reign in the winter of 338 BC and ruled for at least 2 years, as an apispal sarcophagus suggests, his fall and Persia's recovery of Egypt must have occurred by early 335 BC. By then, Darius III had consolidated power and could focus on restoring stability. In 336 BC, 2 major challenges faced Darius III: Egypt's rebellion and the launch of Philip II of Macedon's campaign in Asia, which began with a 10,000-man force in western Anatolia. Philip's assassination later that year may have temporarily relieved the threat from Macedonia, allowing Darius to turn his attention to suppressing the Egyptian revolt, preparing, as the Satrap stela hints, both a fleet and a land army for the reconquest. We can only speculate about what happened next. Persian control was clearly restored in Egypt, as evidenced by a demonic document from early 334 BC recording an exchange of property in the name of Sabakes, the new Persian satrap. Restoration likely occurred in 335 BC. There's no record of battles, only the Satrap stela's note that Khababash had anticipated a naval assault by ships from Byblos, a reference to the Achaemenids' predominantly Phoenician navy. Eventually, Khababash probably realized that with Darius III consolidating the Persian armed forces behind him, he didn't stand a real chance of repelling the invader. And so, he seems to have vanished, perhaps fleeing into the Delta marshes, westward into Libya, or south into Nubia. The last possibility finds some support in an inscription of Nastasen, the 26th king of Kush, or Nubia, who reigned in the late 4th century BC. It records his victory over an invader from the north named Kembesweden, which may be a corrupted version of Khababash. If so, the inscription may preserve a trace of Khababash's later life. After losing Egypt, he may have fled south and attempted to carve out power at the expense of the Kushite king, only to be defeated. Nastasen's text is silent about Kembeswenden's ultimate fate. A Persian expeditionary force probably reoccupied Egypt with little resistance. Darius III may not have led it personally. The command likely fell to Sabakes, who was afterward made satrap as a reward. Evidence of Sabakes' activity comes mainly from his coinage, probably used to pay Greek mercenaries who helped secure the reconquest and maintain garrisons across the country. These troops likely remained until 333 BC, when Sabakes marched with them to join Darius III against Alexander III of Macedon, who we know better today as Alexander the Great. According to the historians Arrian, Quintius Curtius Rufus, and Diodorus Siculus, Sabakes died at the Battle of Issus, which was the first direct encounter between Alexander and the great king of Persia himself. After Sabakes' death, a certain Mazakes became satrap. With most Persian forces gone to Syria to aid Darius III against Alexander, Egypt was left pretty much exposed. The area was ripe for a new native revolt, but none occurred, perhaps because there was no surviving Delta dynasty to rally around. Instead, the next challenge came from an unlikely source, the Macedonian renegade, Amyntas. Amyntas had fought for the Persians at Isis, but deserted after their defeat. With 4,000 Greek mercenaries and ships taken from the Persian fleet at Cyprus, he sailed to Egypt, easily seized Pelusium, and announced that Darius III had appointed him satrap in place of Sabakes. Sailing up the Nile to Memphis unopposed, Amyntas confronted Mazakes, who lacked the forces to stop him. Hoping to exploit the chaos, local Egyptians rushed to attack the Persian garrison at Memphis, forcing Mazakes into a desperate defense. Mazakes sent his limited troops to confront Amyntas outside the city, but they were quickly routed. When Amyntas' men began plundering carelessly around Memphis, Mazakes struck back in a surprise counterattack. His remaining forces overwhelmed the scattered Greeks, killing Amyntas and his entire army. Persian control of Egypt, though shaken and resented, thus persisted through most of 332 BC. That same year, Alexander of Macedon turned south after his victories in Syria and Phoenicia, clearly intending to invade Egypt. Mazakes knew that invasion was inevitable, but was unable to stop it. With no strong fortifications, few men, and dwindling resources, Mazakes had no realistic chance of resisting the Macedonians. After 10 months besieging Tyre and then Gaza, Alexander set out for Egypt in late 332 BC. His advance mirrored that of Artaxerxes III nearly a decade earlier, combining land and naval forces. From Gaza, he marched along the northern Sinai coast to Pelusium in 7 days, while his fleet sailed ahead and was already anchored there when he arrived. Mazakes, barely holding Memphis, made no attempt to resist. When Alexander reached Pelusium, he met no enemy army, only a great throng of Egyptians that had gathered to welcome him. Persian rule over Egypt had effectively ended. Mazakes had won a stroke of good fortune months earlier by defeating Amyntas and his 4,000 mercenaries, but his situation was hopeless against the Macedonian king, Alexander. He commanded too few troops to mount a serious defense. He could have attempted to hold out within Memphis's formidable citadel, yet he already knew that Darius III had fled in defeat from the Battle of Isis, and that Alexander had relentlessly besieged both Tyre and Gaza. A similar fate awaited Memphis: prolonged siege, no relief from Persia, and almost certainly no help from the Egyptians. Realizing that resistance was indeed futile, Mazakes chose instead to surrender the entire country. This likely happened near Heliopolis, the ancient city of the sun god Ra, where the Nile split into several branches. Heliopolis had long been an important place for royal coronations. According to the historian Quintus Curtius Rufus, Mazakes handed over a huge treasure, about 800 talents, along with royal furnishings, probably including symbols of Egyptian kingship, and maybe even a throne. This may have marked Alexander's first formal recognition as king of Egypt, with Mazakes himself presenting him with the royal insignia in the same place where many native pharaohs had once been crowned. In this way, Persian rule ended, not through battle, but through ceremony. The last Persian satrap, Mazakes, peacefully surrendered to the Macedonian conqueror. By doing so, he handed over control of Egypt's ancient heartland to a new ruler from southwestern Europe, Alexander III of Macedon, better known to us today as Alexander the Great. We'll cover Alexander's time in the two lands in the next episode of Ancient Egypt, Dynasty by Dynasty. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. I'd also like to thank the channel's patrons for making videos like this possible. These include, but are certainly not limited to, XXXI, Yap de Graaf, Pasta Frola, Michael Lewis, Daniel Allen, Danny Van Eck, Wenix TV, Robert Morgan, Strobex, Frank, Tim Lane, Sebastian Otaro Correa, Michael Trudell, Leader Titan, Micah G, John Scarberry, Andrew Bomer, Connor Dolson, Krish, Ben Van Rijsvik, David R, Stephen Ball, Gabe, Monty Grimes, Franz Robbins, Cyrus Mir, Dianastra, Nimrod Nir, Hypnosan, Brendan Redmond, Faridun Dadachanji, Jimmy Daruwala, Inihide Debu, Gulistan Debu, Sherkam, Farhad Kama, and all of the channel's patrons on Patreon for helping to support this and all future content. Check out the benefits to being a Patreon member, and if you'd like to join, feel free to click the link in the video description. You can also follow History with Sai on Instagram, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter, as well as continue to listen to special audio programs on the History with Sai podcast. Thanks again, and stay safe.